speaking of children in this regard, have you guys heard about Yuma, Arizona? Not too far from where I'm standing, and the brink of collapse because unprecedented migration. The migrant surge has totally just been basically has overwhelmed any border patrol. They can't handle it anymore. And the idea here is, of course, drug cartels. The drug cartel, the trafficking of children and women, sex trafficking of women and children. It is at an all-time high. It's on the brink of collapse. Hospitals and food banks in Yuma are not able to handle the amount of people coming in. So it's crumbling. The infrastructure there is crumbling. El Paso the same way, but this is about Yuma. So it's Biden. Is the Biden administration co-conspirators with this, Jay, with the cartel?
We're not allowed to know these things. Okay, I'm going to go by exactly what the Biden administration says. There's no problem at the border. In fact, I'm going to go and talk to Mexico and Canada, and we're going to just be this one big conglomerate of the North American Union. And we just need to make sure that there are more abortions in Mexico. Once we do that, there'd be no more problem with immigrants. So that we have to make sure that they push the abortion rights in Mexico.
Yeah, and the homosexual rights too. That's a big thing.
Correct.
That they want to push in too. It isn't. So you bring up a good point. So there's no border issue because there are no borders. If there are no borders, there are no issues. So why pass a law that it's moot? Because you need a border. Well, you need a law for the border, but if you don't have a border, you don't need a law.
Yeah. And they're coming to America to find jobs, which we're slowly turning over to machines and computers.
Yeah.
No, we don't. There's no disaster there. There's no major disaster of unemployment coming. Not at all. Everything's rosy. Everything's fine. The president's going to go make some hot dogs. The economy is as sound as can be. Don't worry. We've got this under control. Trust me.
I know Australia has a very different laws, and Dave, you correct me if I'm wrong. I think they're very strict in terms of immigration. Is that right?
Yes, they have been. I'm not sure about the current government, but they have been in the past.
Yeah. I think Albanese let all the Chinese citizens come in, the CCP come into Australia and become citizens there. But here in the States, it's kind of it's a bizarre thing because they want a blanket of amnesty, and that includes the trafficking of drugs. We'll talk about that in a moment, but the trafficking of children and women for prostitution. This is skyrocketing here in California. Oh my, if you want to know a problem, Jay, tell us more. If you want to know a problem, go down the street, pick a street in LA area, and what would you find?
You would find homelessness tents in some areas, but more than often you're going to find women being prostituted, women being sold as if they're chattel. It's unfortunately, again, they don't matter according to our modern politicians. They're voluntarily there, which is not the case in most cases.
Right.
Yet it's increasing because there's a class of people, especially fortunately in Los Angeles, that don't care because they're willing clients to what is in total truth modern day slavery.
It is modern day slavery, and you're seeing basically what in the Roman Empire what they did. They would bring children and women from other nations, bring them in. They would adopt their god sometimes in those cases if they conquer that area, and the children would become their slaves or sacrifices to their gods. And I think we talked about that here with Jacob one time. This is exactly what's going on, and how if you read some of the history of the church, how Christians would adopt these little girls and these boys and these young men who were being prostituted, were being left for dead and orphans in the streets of Rome because they had no use for them anymore. And it was the Christians who actually took in these children. And that was the next generation of believers who suffered tremendously, of course, under the rule of the emperors. Are we revisiting that? You guys think that we're revisiting that again?
We absolutely are. And it's a tidal wave where you have people coming into the country that are being subjected to this. And then later down the line, when they get sick, they're impacting the medical system. Later on, when they need benefits, they're impacting the financial system. It is a humanitarian crisis of epic proportions, but no, instead of actually saving money for taking care of this, let's send it over to Europe so we can fight and kill other people.
In the UK, because of the policies of their administration, and of course the new prime minister hasn't done anything about it. Parliament hasn't done anything about it. The migration, the boat migrants coming in daily, and of course that's in the UK, but in France and Europe, it is the same thing from a different perspective. These migrants come from Africa. The migrants here come from mainly Latin America, and in a lot of cases even China. And that is overwhelming those systems there. So it is an overwhelming amount of migration coming in because, let's face it, George Soros and his open border society want that to happen in order to bring about a borderless system where everybody's just a citizen of the world. And therefore, it's a lot easier to control people that way. It's a lot easier to control people that way.
If borders were not important, the Chinese would not have built the Great Wall of China. I really want you to understand this concept. They built a wall for thousands of miles because borders are important.
Yeah.
But according to our politicians now, they are not. They're denying reality.
They are denying reality for sure. And if politicians would have their way, especially in California, what they have done, like you talked about what you find in LA. I wanted to play this quick video. This is from 2008. This is a man who I think the Democratic Party wants to be the next president. Yeah.
We believe fundamentally that food solves hunger, that shelters solve sleep, and that housing solves homelessness. And if we're going to solve the problem of those that are out on the streets that we define as homeless, we better solve the housing problem if we're going to have an impact. And that's why we established this framework, what we call a 10-year plan to end chronic homelessness in San Francisco. That's why we established this framework, what we call a 10-year plan to end chronic homelessness in San Francisco.
Hasn't worked out, huh? Did not work out as well.
If food solved hunger, California food production went down because he cut water to the Central Valley, which grows most of the food. Yeah. If building homes ends homelessness, then why are the permit restrictions and everything else as far as building codes so draconian in California? If you would like to see what America will look like under the leadership and presidency of our dear, wonderful leader up in Sacramento, go to San Francisco, do a tour of Chinatown, and understand that it's coming to every city of America if he's put into office.
What a mess. This is what he said in 2008. He says he's going to solve it. They're not solving anything. In fact,
it's gotten worse.
Yeah.
Worse.
The fact that this man's still the government. Go ahead, Davey.
Oh, just with the open border policy, the drugs have just been flowing in via China through Mexico. The fentanyl problem in the state is just gone through the roof. And then let's help them by giving them the safe injecting for facilities, or whatever they call them over there.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
done every single thing possible to exacerbate the problem, nothing to solve it. And just going back to the prostitution before, he touts it as being a great achievement, you know, like the celebration of legalizing of sex workers. A lot of them are underage. Some as young as 12, 15, I believe. And the mental health problems they have because of it. I think you were reading to us from an article earlier on, and I think the average time one of those poor people have to commit a sexual act today is around about 21 times.
Yep.
Um,
21 times a day with different guys.
Yep, and that's what Newsom boasts in.
It is completely not. I mean, liberals usually are the ones that they tout themselves as humanitarians. There's nothing human. I mean, it's the destruction of humanity in their souls and in their spirit, and they're the criminals. They're the criminals of today. But because they wear a suit and they sit in the White House or in some kind of parliament or in some, they're not arrested. In fact, they have they have immunity. They have immunity from any legal things. You brought up the fentanyl thing, Davey. This is interesting. I don't know how big Snapchat is in Australia, but here in America, there's an app called Snapchat. It's kind of like what TikTok. It's a beginning of a few years ago. It came out 2016, 2015, something like that. And a lot of kids love it because it has all these filters and you can change your face and all that stuff. And it's pretty weird. And they have these messages that can self-destruct within a few minutes. It's just they disappear. And one of the things that they have done is investigate Snapchat's role in fentanyl death. They are the most self-destructive thing. One of the most self-destructive things you can do in for your kids is let them go on Snapchat, and it's being investigated now because it's easy to traffic fentanyl to kids, not only by the videos they post, by the messages, where you can get it, who you can talk to, who you can contact. And Snapchat has done very little about limiting this. And so they have these self-destructing messages, they call it. So you take a message, you send it out, within a few minutes, it's gone. And kids are buying fentanyl, are getting fentanyl, and they're dying. And an Iowa family had to file a lawsuit against Snapchat because there was a young girl that died because she obtained fentanyl on the platform, and nothing is being done about it until now. I guess you could say it took a man named Jim Carroll who was basically dealing with this and finally brought it up to the FBI. They are Snapchat and those technology platforms have basically allowed a complete destruction of children because of the ease of fentanyl and drugs, especially Snapchat. I'm sure Google, I'm sure Twitter used to be that with what do they call OnlyFans, basically young girls, becoming involved in prostitution and pornography, and people paying to see these girls online nude. And so it is a cesspool of not only violence, but it's a cesspool of sex, a cesspool of drugs, and kids are dying. It's no question about it. Kids are being killed because of the overdose of fentanyl sold through these tech companies.
There is no feminism in a world of sexual exploitation of women.
Oh, that's very true.
There is absolutely no women's rights where women are objectified and turned into nothing more than pleasure for men, or worse, turned into money mills for men. And when you have OnlyFans, when you have prostitution, that's what they become. Again, they become chattel. They don't become human. They become something to be bought and sold. And it's crazy that feminism, of all things, is not fighting the exploitation of women.
That's right. They should be up in arms about that. They're the ones who should be up in arms about young girls being exploited, young women being exploited, trafficked. No, nothing. In
And
fact,
the only,
yeah, go ahead.
and the only change that will come is when men start being men again and not
Amen.
allowing this to happen.